Thank you very much. And as he stated, the Human Rights Commission is a part of the group that's looking at these stops now. So now I have 4 questions here I need to get out to have you respond, and I'll start with the most basic question here. Do you think that racial profiling takes place? Yes, sir. You want to comment?
No, just, yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Did you want to say anything? Okay, all right, so.
In agreement with you.
Okay, good, all right, so it does exist. Okay, what do you suggest we do? What do you think? How should we go about it? What do we do? What's needed? Let's talk about it. And I would hope now that nobody engages in going after anyone, all right? Please. Okay, anybody care to respond to the question? Yes, sir.
Get the mic. I think there are a number of things that can be done. And with respect to this project, and you're working with the various police departments, is that on a voluntary basis by the police department, or is it mandated?
But the question was, the law that the Alvin Penn Act, it's named after the senator from Bridgeport, Alvin Penn. Is that a voluntary law? Do departments voluntarily turn over data? And the answer is no. It's mandated by law. Police departments are required to report information on every single person that they pull over, and they have to do it in virtually real time. And so the answer is it's not voluntary, so we're doing pretty good in the collection piece. I just want to, before I turn it back to you, I just want to make sure the panel also knows they can respond to these questions as well. But I don't think you were done with your question.
Yeah, with respect to what can be done about it.
I think the observation I'd like to make, he wanted to hear you.
Cool.
He wanted to hear you. Okay.
Trust me, he could hear me if I wanted, but we don't need to go there. Look, the fact of the matter is, having a dialogue is one step. Collecting the data is another step. Okay, how you then implement that data in some form of some accountability mechanism, that's what determines how successful you will be. So it can't stop at any of those steps. There needs to be a collective understanding that, one, if we're going to stop this, then we need to hold everyone accountable. That obviously applies to the police department, that applies to our elected officials, that applies to our communities, and unless we're prepared to get out there and do the work to make sure that this does stop, it's going to continue, and we will continue to have dialogue. So there needs to be some measurable punitive action, if you will, that will speak to it, because you can talk till you're blue in the face. Okay, you said it already, Bill. People are not necessarily going to change their minds. I'm not about trying to change your minds. I'm about trying to change your actions. And that's where the accountability piece has to play a role, a significant role.
And I'd like to respond to that further down the line here.
Has any female that's in the room here has ever been stopped by a police officer and she thought it was unlawful? That's why I wanted to ask that question before I spoke.
Okay.
That's why I was just asking you.
Anybody care to respond?
Yes, please.
I just acknowledged that I've been stopped before and where I felt like I was the victim of racial profiling. I don't know.
And how do you feel? No, this is why we're here. We need to know how you feel and how
Okay, Tamara, will you stand and give your response, please, so that everybody is hearing?
Thank you. I'm from New London County, so I'm not from this area, and I just want to offer that first. But I have been stopped multiple times. On one occasion, 3 times in a week. And I know, and 2 of the occasions, I was not speeding, and I did signal. And so I know how that made me feel. I felt firstly frustrated at the multiple times that I was stopped. And then beyond that, I felt like I was a target of some type of police action. So it's scary. It's frustrating and you feel powerless because nothing seems to change. Each time I did complain, I don't know that anything really came of it, but that's my experience.
Thank you so much. Thank you. You honor us with your speech.
Thank you, Fernando.
Thank you. My name is Adrian L. Octavius Bay. I'm from the Moorish National American community, and I would just like to speak on behalf of our community, our people. I'd like to talk to you about, you were speaking, and you said y'all was speaking saying everything was fair. No, I'm directing it to the chief and the state's attorney. They said everything is okay here in Waterbury. Do y'all really believe that? Y'all really believe that? Do y'all really think everything is okay with your traffic stops here in Waterbury? They've proven they can improve, but
I think
we're
they've
fair.
improved. I think,
Hey, yo, do me a favor.
Yo,
We're not going to engage in tick for tat.
tick for tat.
Got a question,
That's what I'm doing.
get the question out.
That's what
Thank
she's didn't even answer yet.
Okay.
Just hold on. She's trying to answer, sir. Thank you.
So your question is, do I think everything's okay with traffic stops in Waterbury?
Correct.
I think I provided some information. I think things are working well. We've worked with Ken Barone and his crew. We've made some changes to the way we've done things over the course of the last 6 or 7 years. Do we get it right all the time? No. We made 11,000 stops in 20 months. It's a lot of stops.
How many
Are
blacks?
mistakes made?
How many Hispanics? Do we got that number?
Yeah, absolutely.
We would love to have those numbers in our community because our community doesn't
so
know.
out of the 11,047 stops made over the course of the last 20 months, up until last week, 67.05% of those people were white. 32.03% of those people were black.
How many Hispanic?
So Hispanic as an ethnicity, 3,632 were Hispanic in ethnicity.
Police chief, I had dropped a judicial notice off to you. I gave it to badge 787. And I got a question for the state's attorney office. Could you give me the definition of a crime? A crime. A crime. What's the definition of a crime? I'm just saying, according to like you're using jurisprudence and the Black Laws Dictionary and constitutional law, not policy, because I heard him sit there and say policies. You know, policy is not law. Policies is what they say it is. Ordinances, penal codes, and statutes. It's not law. And I want you to give me the definition of a crime. In order for it to be a crime, there has to be an injured party with an affidavit signed.
sure, a crime is a violation of a law that has been passed by the legislature and signed by the governor and is incorporated in our statute books. That's a crime.
But according, there has to be an injured party in that crime. There has to be an affidavit of fact according to the law, because I study jurisprudence and I read the Black Laws Dictionary. I got like all 10 of them, like, you know what I mean? So, you know, I'm part of a movement called Rise of the Moors, and we just had, matter of fact, about 2 weeks ago, we had a Second Amendment class, and the Providence police was stacked on each side of the building, and we went outside and we faced them. And you gotta understand it, it's all over YouTube. And matter of fact, we have a lawsuit against the Providence Police Department right now for violating our rights, you know what I'm saying? Because when you deal with the Moors, you gotta understand you're dealing with diversity of citizenship. You know what I'm saying? So, like, when we step into the venues, we're asking for our cases to be transported to federal court. Like, I drive, and matter of fact, I travel. And I got private plates on my car, so if any policy enforcer was to see me, if they pulled me over, you're not gonna respect my moral credentials? Because, I mean, I got all my papers.
Right. I think I responded to what the law is in Connecticut. The law evolves all the time. The legislature is constantly changing the law, and our Supreme Court interprets.
Is it state or constitutional law?
Well, we have state laws and we have federal laws.
We're dealing with the
State-
more.
State prosecutors enforce state laws, federal prosecutors enforce federal laws, and there is some mix. Sometimes things are state violations and federal violations.
Well-
So sometimes there has to be a decision whether it's prosecuted on a federal level or on a state level.
Very understandable, but you know, we have the contract that you're bound by, and that's the Peace Treaty of 1787. And then we just wanna understand, like, you're enforcing policies. You're not enforcing law. Because I mean, honestly, I could give you law all day. I mean, I don't want. I mean, I done sat with lawyers and.
Do you have another question?
No, it's okay. If I understand his position.
I want to make sure that it continues to flow. If it doesn't flow, if someone is holding.
You see me on that nag, huh? Django.
My question is basically, since you talked about a decrease since 2012, seemed to be going down since 2012, because I remember the numbers right then. Could that be because of the impact that video cams are having around the state? Also because when cams are in action, police act differently.
Who you directed to?
Yeah.
Well, I can't speak to the statistics that Ken and his group study and what impact any one technology advancement or atmospheric advancement would have on it, but in Waterbury, we're currently in the process of looking at body cameras. We don't carry them yet. We don't have dash cameras. It's something that we're recently worked on with the union. We've had several vendors in the building over the course of the last 6 months, and we're in the process of beta testing a couple of different cameras. So, you know, there has been no impact as far as police video footage that would change the way officers would react in a traffic stop in Waterbury.
What I'm really pointing at is that I see the decrease in the state of Connecticut basically because there are more eyes on the process than there was before cams came into play. Cams have been a big thing in the last, a lot of departments have them. I know Waterbury doesn't yet.
Right, well, I think there is a process. There wasn't, up until a few years ago when the Alvin Penn Act was passed. And, you know, police departments have been working with the state's attorney's office and Ken's crew at Central Connecticut to make sure that we're in compliance with the law.
That's a really good question, right? And I think at the foundation of your question, what you're asking is, what is driving some of the change in the state of Connecticut? And it's a complex answer. Do I think that the evolution of technology, be it on our cell phones or be it more departments wearing body cameras, is having an impact on interactions between law enforcement and the communities they serve? The answer is yes. There's been a lot of studies, not here in Connecticut because the technology is fairly new, but there's been a lot of studies across the country about how the behavior of all parties involved tends to change when there's a camera, right, that is visible. Now, there's a few things, right? One is that cameras aren't necessarily new to policing, right? Most vehicles now, for a long time, have been equipped with cameras in them. The body camera's new. There's been sort of a cultural shift, I think, among the public where more and more people are filming law enforcement interactions on their cell phones, and so I think that is likely penetrated and is having an effect. But more to the point about, what is causing, the disparities to decrease. Let me just be clear about a few things, right? I'm a academic. So when I talk about things, I talk about them in academic terms, and I use the word disparity. Disparity just means I've measured something based on something else, and one group was stopped, in this case, more than I would expect, okay? The disparity 7 years ago was really big. Okay? The disparity still exists, it's smaller. Unfortunately, disparities will likely continue to exist in traffic stop data for the foreseeable future due to factors that are oftentimes outside of the control of law enforcement. And so the tough job we have is trying to figure out to what degree are law enforcement playing a role in causing or exasperating a disparity, and to what degree is it already baked into the cake. So for example, we know that houses are cheaper on busier roadways, okay? And busier roadways are traveled by more people, and so police are naturally going to patrol roadways that have more cars on them, because that's where more accidents are going to be, that's where more people are going to be, right? So police will place more resources there. We know that the housing price on, say, Main Street is going to be cheaper than in a more rural area. And we know that there are socioeconomic factors are today in America related to race and ethnicity. And so we know that the odds that a minority individual, Black or Hispanic, is going to live in areas where police patrol at higher rates is going to occur for factors that are outside of a lot of people's control. There are economic factors, there's a long history of housing discrimination that we could talk about, and the way we designed our cities and where we place grocery stores. I mean, there's a whole sort of, right, we call it institutional racism, right? And so that continues to play a role in disparities existing. And so I think one of the reasons why we have, as a state, have started to make progress is because we've worked with 31 of the 107 departments over the last 5 years. And in each of those departments, the factors that were driving the disparity were unique to that department. And everybody's making a change here and a change there. And albeit in a lot of departments they might be small, when they come together collectively, it has a large impact. And so I'll give you a real example of what we found in Waterbury 5 or 6 years ago, because that's the community we're talking about. We came into Waterbury, and one thing that we noticed real quickly, real early on, was that there was a significant number of vehicles being stopped or driving around unregistered, right? The cars weren't registered. And the police department at the time was predominantly looking for unregistered vehicles in neighborhoods where more Hispanic individuals lived. And so naturally, more Hispanic drivers were being stopped because they were being exposed to police at a higher rate. So the question for us as researchers was, well, to what degree is this a socioeconomic factor, right? It costs money to register your vehicle, and there are certain socioeconomic factors impacting a community, and that's causing more vehicles to be unregistered. Or is it an exposure, meaning police are just looking for that violation at a higher rate in that area? And so we ran some tests in Waterbury. And what we actually found is that if you exposed the whiter parts of Waterbury to the same type of police enforcement, I mean, you ran plates at a similar rate as you did in the more predominantly Hispanic neighborhood, you found unregistered vehicles at a similar rate. But over time, my officers are told, go out and get unregistered vehicles. Oftentimes we develop implicit associations between who might be driving an unregistered vehicle and I have a job to do. I've got to go out and get unregistered vehicles. So I go out and I run plates and I run them in the area where I know I'll find unregistered vehicles. And I find them, and then I go back and I say, see, look, I found these unregistered vehicles, and in a way I create a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so some of the work we did with Waterbury say, well, we've got to ensure that our enforcement of this law is occurring equally across the city of Waterbury, and that we're not going into only the Hispanic neighborhood to run plates, and we're never going into the outer parts of town to run plates. Or that, the reason for running plates in neighborhood A is linked to other things, like, we're going to look for, there's a certain crime or disorder problem in this neighborhood, and this is our enforcement strategy, and part of that is running plates, but that would be acceptable. So the point being, these are sort of complex conversations that we have with departments. I think what we saw in the data over the course of 5 years in Waterbury is you saw less registration enforcement in those neighborhoods that we had highlighted. And you saw registration enforcement being more equally distributed throughout the community. We saw that as we've had these conversations with communities, there's technology out there that often runs the license plate so the officer doesn't have to. It's a license plate reader. Well, some of the conversations we have with departments is ensuring that that license plate reader isn't only placed in the black neighborhood. And some of the reasons why it might be placed in the black neighborhood is because, you know, there's 3 times more traffic in that neighborhood because, you know, Route 1 runs through it. Okay, so you understand why the license plate reader might be placed there, but we've got to understand the unintended consequences of certain policing. So my point being, right, policing is complicated. The reasons for disparities are complicated, and it requires us engaging in an honest conversation about what's causing the disparities, and departments being willing to say, okay, we'll look at that. Okay, we'll assess the unintended consequence of strategy A versus ensuring that I continue to have a good relationship with my community. And that's the type of work we did in Waterbury, which is why I think we're seeing progress.
What about the,
Yes, go right ahead.
yeah.
I'm sorry, he might not have been done.
I was listening to everything you were saying, Ken, and I want to go back to what you had said in the beginning, Bill, about keeping this real, okay? Now, the underlying theme to everything you just said is racism. Now, you can couch it in socioeconomic terms, you can couch it in other BS terms, and this is not a knock at you, don't get me wrong, but the sad fact is I hear this everywhere I go. We try to find excuses to keep from talking about the real problem, which is indeed racism. And unless that's on the table, and unless we are truly looking at solutions to some of these problems, it ain't gonna change. Okay, so unless we're prepared to grab that bull by the horn, recognize the fact that there are some cops here who don't like me because I'm black, okay? I may be Hispanic. You could say I'm poor, but hell, they don't know I'm poor. They know I'm black. And I'm speaking from experience when I say this. This is not a knock at any cop in this room. I don't recall any of you guys stopping me unfairly, or ladies for that matter, but the reality is it exists. And it exists in those communities, those people of color communities. I don't say minority, because people of color are not a minority, that's number one. But it happens in those communities for a specific reason. For a specific reason, and that's called racism. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about that dialogue. Let's talk about collecting that data and making sure that that data is real. Okay, if you are afraid to tell me, or if you're afraid to answer a question, are you a racist? There's a problem. And you know what? You're not gonna answer that question, so my next thing is, based on what you do, I'm gonna hold you accountable to it. So you don't have to tell me. Your actions are gonna prove beyond a shadow of a doubt what you are. And when that comes out, then you have to pay the piper. These are the things we need to be doing, looking at those tools to speak to that.
Thank you. Mr. Reyes, if you want to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Dyson. I just wanted to just make a few statements here. So these are conversations that we talk about a great deal. And I think that at the end of the day, sir, you're 100% right. We're not going to solve the racism problem right here tonight. We're not. But what we can talk about, what we can put on the table is accountability. That's what we have to put on the table. And I'm going to give you an example that it's very near and dear to our heart because it just happened. So a state police officer ran a stop sign, crashed the car, and the rest of the story goes like this. Nothing happened to him. They first said they didn't have the film, then they had the film. My point being, police have to be accountable just like every other citizen. And if we don't talk that way, if there are different standards for different people, then you're already inherently building the racism in the policies that you're instituting. And I'm not here to knock one station or one police station over another. It really doesn't matter. If it's racism, let's call it for what it is, and let's make it accountable for every single person, police or not.
And that's why we need those mechanisms that do that. That's what my point is. Unless we're implementing mechanisms that actually address that, these conversations will continue.
My question is this, towards the traffic stops. Is it probable cause or constitutional wrong that causes that stop? Because, I mean, if it's probable cause, and does that stop provide a statement? If an officer stops you and they have to have probable cause, does the officer have to have a probable cause statement or affidavit attached to that detainment? And is that detainment based on probable cause from Title 14, a contractual agreement, or a constitutional violation?
So in Waterbury, I mean, in police stopping cars, yes, you need probable cause. A police officer needs probable cause of a violation of motor vehicle law, or frankly, some other law, some violation of the criminal statute to stop that vehicle, right, initially. As far as documenting that, it would depend on the action the officer took.
Okay, so
If an arrest was made, an officer would have to file a report, he would have to establish probable cause, and would go through the judicial system. There'd be an arraignment along those lines. The officer could issue a misdemeanor summons, which is a take into custody offense if necessary. In Waterbury, normally we don't lock people up for that. We give them the misdemeanor summons, give them a promise to appear. And again, they would have to establish probable cause. That information and documentation would have to go to court, to the state's attorney's office, and be adjudicated that way. And then there would be an infraction. There's infractionable offenses, and there's also city ordinances that could be violated. Those would be on infractions. They could come with a fine. The person would have the opportunity to plead not guilty and have the opportunity to have a hearing to determine whether they believe that violation occurred or not.
okay. So what you're saying is this: a probable cause is based on could be based on a city ordinance or a state ordinance, or is it? I mean, do they have to have? Now, when you stop them, is that a detainment, or are they free to go? Can they ask that question? Are they free to go, or are they being detained? If they're being detained, is it based on a warrant, or what you believe to be probable cause?
It's based on the officer's observations and the furtherance of his investigation or her investigation. It's not based on a warrant.
Okay.
I mean, just to be fair, the motor vehicle laws are written in such a way that virtually everybody who gets in their vehicle and turns it on probably has some technical violation.
Right.
That give the police the legal authority to stop and detain you while they...
By way of contract, right? Title 14. Right, but that's what I'm saying. So, I mean, I was in a meeting one day, and there was an officer that said, listen, we can find something in Title 14 to stop you. And I understand that contractual agreement, you can find somebody. So, based on that, can they say, I mean, then why should we talk about racial profiling when there's a law or violation that they say has been broken? Are you saying that they don't do it in other areas, or because you can stop anybody at any given time and find a violation?
Yeah. So the question is about, right? We have something we call, right? You've got equity and equality. So the question is, the truth is that most of the time, right, short of the officer, right, making up the violation that occurred, officers have a lot of discretion in this area, and you know, what we're looking for is if people are being treated similarly. So if one group, say, sped more than another group, which there are, we know that people under the age of 25 tend to drive faster than people over the age of 60. Okay, so having a disparity, meaning more young people stop for speeding, is logical. That makes sense because we've got lots of data that tells us that they violate that law at a higher rate. There are other laws that aren't violated at differential rates across age, race, gender. So some of what we're looking for is, okay, why is it that this group is being stopped for this violation more than this group? Not because the violation didn't occur, and not because the police didn't have the legal authority to stop those people, but because they're being treated differently. Okay. And they're being treated differently without evidence that they violate that law at a higher rate.
Okay, so if a community got detained or seized with probable cause, is there a way that for each stop, can we request a probable cause statement? And
Police have to report the legal authority why they stop every single.
Okay, so we can request that statement, if, upon request.
I think probably best if the state's attorney, you'd like to try to answer that question, please?
Yes, the simple answer is yes.
Okay, thank you, that's all I need. Thank you so much.
Now, the young lady there with the hand up, you're next.
There's been a lot in the New York papers about the issue of something called testifying, which has become so prevalent in the New York City courts that both the Bronx and the Brooklyn DA's office keep a list of police officers who they won't call to testify. Judges have thrown out cases based on this. I wanted to ask you, how confident are you in the testimony of the police officers who appear in your court?
As a state's attorney, I have a duty to disclose exculpatory information, and if an officer has a reputation for untruthfulness, that would be exculpatory information. Prosecutors are not like regular defense attorneys, where defense attorneys may know something that implies guilt. They don't have to tell me, and they shouldn't. That's their duty. But as prosecutors, under Brady versus U.S., we have a duty to disclose. There's something sent out called a Giglio letter in Connecticut, and every time an officer testifies, we send a Giglio letter to the chief of that department asking for any evidence, even if it wasn't criminal in nature, showing untruthfulness or racial bias or something like that under the Giglio letter. And those are done as a matter of course and should be done for every trial.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I have a question for the state's attorney. Are you familiar with color of law? Do you know what color of law is?
I am familiar to a certain extent, and I've seen this document before.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna give you a brief history real quick. Now, color of law is for it's under the Spanish Inquisition. You gotta understand, we are not black. We are not white. Black and white is a legal status. Okay? Like when I look over here, I see Europeans. Them are Europeans. When I see her, I see him, I see him, I see him, I see her, I see you. We Moors, bro. I don't know about that black and white and all of that. We Moors. So when you using them terms, them semantics, you dumbing us down as a people. We bigger than that. You gotta understand, we don't gotta have no license and registrations and all that for our car. We don't gotta have none of that. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't know where y'all people are getting at coming and enforcing these policies in the indigenous people here. Like I could give you a whole history about Waterbury, Connecticut. You know what I'm saying? Like you can't play with the semantics with me. You know what I'm saying? Like we want our freedom. And you talk like you had Vernon Riddick up there, okay? He from out here in Waterbury, but still and yet he has to follow a policy. You know what I'm saying? People say, oh, he's black and he's the police chief. That don't mean nothing. You got to change the policy because at the end of the day, we getting our ass kicked out here. And I just don't want that to happen to my son, because if that happens to my son, I'm operating in my private capacity and I will sue everybody. And I'm not playing, because when I come, it's going to be Rise of the Moors. You won't see like, probably, man, I'll raise him up like Farrakhan, man. I'm not playing. We want you to respect us. Respect us, man. Stop trying to use colorable law with us. Black, white. That's legal status. I could give it all to you. Did you receive my judicial notice? I gave it to badge 787. I came to drop it off to you one day.
What notice? I'm sorry.
It's a judicial notice. It's a 10-page document. It has my right to travel. It's basically your contract. When you took an oath to uphold the Constitution, you gotta understand, when you took that oath to uphold the Constitution, your citizenship is relinquished. So how are you enforcing policies, trying to call policies laws against the indigenous people that's already been here? But you call them black, you call them Hispanic and all of that. I got the history. We do this. I wake up every day, I breathe this stuff. Constitutional law, I breathe it, I eat it.
Wanted to ask, is there citizens on this board that was created for this policy?
Yes, actually.
Because I might have missed it, but...
So good question. We have community representatives as well, position on the advisory board, along with a number of groups like the ACLU, the NAACP, the state's Commission on Opportunity and Equity have representatives, CHR, Commission on Human Rights. So yes, the short answer is yes.
In all the cities or the towns that you're doing this policy investigation? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so the advisory board is made up of different representatives. In terms of law enforcement representatives, law enforcement have representatives from, there's an organization called the Chiefs of Police Association. They represent all of the municipal police chiefs, so they have representation, along with state police have representation. Obviously, right, having representation from different parts of the state is important. Oftentimes, many members like Tamara, who is both representing the NAACP as a member of our advisory board, is also from the New London area, and we have other folks. Right, we have a public defender who is from the Waterbury area, as an example. So, yeah, so there isn't seats specifically for a Waterbury or a Hartford or a Bridgeport representative. But I think the state itself is fairly well represented. And at some point, right, when you're trying to get people together to make policy and help make policy for the state, you stop and you go, okay, 26 members is probably, right, as good as we're going to get. But I think we're fairly well represented. Right, Bill?
Yes. Is there anyone else? Yes, Tamara? Oh, go right ahead.
Ken, I was wondering, do you guys track like social media? Because I know law enforcement, not particularly police officers, post some real racist things. I just brought an incident actually to the CHRO where they posted something and advocated to put Muslims on nooses and hang them. And I brought this to the attention of to law enforcement, and they really didn't investigate it. They said it was under the First Amendment, which is plain up racism when you advocate to hang people of color. Thank you.
So we obviously only collect the only information that we are statutorily collecting is information on traffic stops. That being said, we try and remain as well read as we can be on what's happening across the country, at least in terms of how other places are monitoring and tracking this particular topic. And I could get you the information after the fact. There was a really fascinating study and there's an investigation, I believe, recently that occurred in the Philadelphia area on just that, on the language used in social media by police officers. And then there's been a number of academic studies about language being used and how the language that they were able to track for known law enforcement officers. Again, this isn't in Connecticut. The role, they tried to measure the role that plays on the culture of a department. So it's a really interesting and new research area that's occurring across the country. It's not something that we've done here in Connecticut as a research topic, but I have a feeling that based on what I've seen other researchers doing, that at some point some researcher, be it at UConn or Yale or Quinnipiac, those are the three that I probably would be most interested, will start to track some of that.
Yes, and I may be completely off the mark, but I want to speak to what I'm feeling in terms of the tension in the room. And my question is, because sometimes this frustration is from feeling unheard, and that they're not represented or not listened to, that the people in the community are not heard or listened to. So my question is there a mechanism in the police department where you have an ongoing dialogue with the members of the community, or is there like an open door policy where people who have questions or concerns can come and sit with you personally and talk about their experiences or their concerns? Basically, what kind of community engagement is going on in the community?
Thank you for asking that question. There certainly is, and I do have an open door policy. One of the things that we've worked on is tried to build upon the community outreach that was done by police chiefs that were here before me, starting back with Chief O'Leary. Some of the things that we've done over the course of the last year is we've created a community outreach program. So as Ken pointed out, policing is complex, and we use a lot of data and a lot of information to make determinations on deployment and where we're going to allocate assets and so on and so forth. The way we police Waterbury is in 3 different sectors. In Waterbury, there's 23 different neighborhood organizations that are very active and vibrant. Those neighborhood organizations break up 8, and 7 are the sectors, right? So what we've been doing on a quarterly basis is going out and creating a community fair in conjunction with the neighborhood organizations that live within that sector. It's not just police. We bring public works, we bring the park department, we bring the public health department, we bring nonprofit organizations and social service agencies that provide services for people in the community in an effort to try to make sure that everyone from that section of the city understands and knows what's available to them for services, and also to try to flesh out some of the issues that may be brewing, some of the quality of life issues that may be happening that may turn into something bigger later. It's been working really good. One of the things that we did over the course of the past year is we've reached out to all our ethnic and racial groups. We have a very strong relationship with all our mosques in the community, the NAACP, the NAACP Youth Council, the Hispanic Coalition. They're always in my office, and they all have my number. I'm very responsive to them with the rest of the command staff and the rest of the officers in the community. There are times when we don't get it right. I think we talked about that before. And those are setbacks that we have to deal with. I feel, and the feedback that I'm getting is that we have an open dialogue. There is communication that's going on. It is transparent. And my thought process is what I'm trying to do with the police department is build relationships in this community, right? Representative Dyson talked in the beginning about trust. And that's a huge thing to accomplish. And it's very difficult to accomplish. And you really can't accomplish trust unless you have a relationship first. And you certainly can't have a relationship unless you can have open lines of communication that people believe in and they know are transparent. And that's really what we're trying to accomplish here in Waterbury. And I'm appreciative of the work that Ken and this Racial Profiling Prohibition Act has done, because it's opened our eyes to a lot of different ways on how we conduct policing here. And Ken talked about specific neighborhoods and looking for unregistered vehicles, and those neighborhoods being more Hispanic populated. Well, what we've done, based on some of that information, is we've created a quality of life cycle, and we use these neighborhood organizations, the 23 neighborhood organizations, to make sure that we disperse our community outreach assets equally and evenly across the community, so each neighborhood gets an opportunity to have the traffic division there, the mounted unit there, the motorcycle unit there, the bicycles there, and whatever community outreach tool that we're actually operating at that time.
Is there someone, yes?
In addition to that, I was just thinking of a more intense, when Tamala was talking, a more intense kind of racial interaction kind of activity, where you actually go and talk about race relations in the community, sort of in a group dynamics kind of way, so that we flush out those kinds of attitudes that are.
I'll try anything, and absolutely, if somebody came up with that format, we'd be happy to participate in that.
No, what I was saying is that community relations is fine, but I think that the topic of racism in specific needs to be an area of discussion that's concentrated on in the police departments with the community.
We recognize that everybody has implicit bias. We understand that there's racism, and we work on that. When we look at our training, each and every officer in the Waterbury Police Department over the course of the last 18 months has been trained in implicit bias from the Department of Justice. We brought de-escalation training into our police department, and it starts at the ground level. Another program that we've started recently is we bring in all community members and give them an opportunity to speak to our cadets while they're in the academy. The goal there is try to create these relationships, try to make some inroads in the very beginning, before these officers hit the street, so they know who the community activists are. They know what the fiber is of Waterbury, and they know that people want to hold them accountable. They're going to hold them accountable, and they're going to try to create relationships with them.
Anyone else who hasn't asked a question? Yes.
This is right to the chief. Are you aware of, following up on the white supremacist discussion, are you aware of any white supremacist activity in the city of Waterbury?
No.
Do you have any sort of effort against that? I mean, the FBI has made white supremacy, domestic terrorism. It's their main priority in that area. Do you have any kind of interest in that?
We certainly have interest in it. I just don't know of it. We're not actively investigating, nor are we aware of any issues that are going on in Waterbury right now. I know there was currently some information about some other towns across the state that there's been some issues at. We have a very, very strong relationship with the SAC, Brian Turner out of the New Haven office of the FBI in Waterbury. There are a number of officers that are assigned to different task force with the FBI, so we are sharing information on a regular basis. Myself and a few of the officers in the command staff had attended ADL training, Anti-Defamation League training in white supremacy and other racial and bias crimes.
There were swastikas painted on Cook Street, right, in Fulton Park last year, yes? That's a thing that happened. There were swastikas painted across the street from the big temple on Cook Street last year, yes? It's like about 18 months ago now. So do you think there is no white supremacist activity in Waterbury?
So your initial question was there anything going on right now? And there's not. We have no complaints. We have no information about any white supremacist activities that are occurring in Waterbury right now. There was an issue up in Cook Street. I think it may have even been longer than that. And frankly, I don't recall the outcome of that. I believe there was an arrest made, but we can certainly get you that information.
I met many law enforcement behind the scenes, and most of them are very good people. And a lot of them even come to me and talk to me and tell me that some of them want to join me in a press conference to let people know that they care just like us. And when I was talking about that white supremacist officer, it was the officers within the department that went after him. So not all law enforcement are racist. I just want to clear that up. Thank you.
Proof of the pudding will be whether you will engage in dialogue with people who are here. That'll be proof of the pudding. Are you willing to step out, pose, question, engage in a dialogue with somebody you may not have trusted before you walked in the door, and still may not trust as you walk out the door? But at least you open the door to engage in conversation about those things that matter to you. And I think they matter to us all. We have to invest in finding a way to do it. We have to invest in that. And that means listening and talking to everybody. Everybody. And that's kind of hard to do sometimes when you got a lot you want to get out. But it needs to be that it's back and forth. It needs to be that it's an exchange. It needs to be that you desire understanding. And it needs to be you want to build trust. Trust. That's a two-way street. And man, is it scary. It is scary to engage in trust. It means you expose yourself. You make yourself vulnerable. Well, if you're not doing that, then what? How do we get there? And I'm just hopeful that all of us will engage in that very thing. Appreciate your being here tonight, and want to leave sometime. Yes, sir.
Right. So you, as an organization, as a person, or whatever, you don't believe that your vehicle needs to be registered, that you need to have insurance on it, and that you need a driver's license to operate your vehicle, right?
That's doing commerce.
I just want to make sure that
That's doing business, because if you're doing commerce, you're doing business.
I just want to make sure that that's clear to the other folks here. that is actually what you believe. Right. So, but it's license, driver's license, registration, and insurance card. No, to operate your vehicle on the public highways in the state of Connecticut. Yes, right. It's a statute. Again, yeah, I know, but they keep bringing it up, so I'm just trying to clarify for everybody.
May I?
That's, you know.
May I?
Right.
What we have done tonight is that we've engaged in a dialogue back and forth with everybody who wanted to participate, and everyone here had the opportunity to hear and listen. Do not let the end of what transpired before result in something else. Again, just making sure that we have the opportunity to engage in a dialogue, all of us, and that we will conclude it by continuing to do what we started doing in the first place. Somebody here now? Yes.
I just want to say it's really difficult to have that trust, especially if, like say take the Walnut Street area, for instance, you live in that area, and the police automatically come in that area, they automatically think they have probable cause. So is it probable cause or is it profiling? So, you know, it's difficult to have that trust for that simple fact.
We can get a statement, right? Now we can ask for a request for the statement or a request that the officer identifies probable cause. Because it could be construed as racism without being probable cause. And I don't want to act like I'm not letting you men and women do your job. But I'm just saying a lot of racial profiling could be based on unconstitutional and not probable cause, because we talked about traffic lights, but I've seen, traveling in this city all throughout the whole day, I've seen just randomly pull you over, just without probable. I mean, they can have traffic light, signal lights, and just, so how do we stop that from just randomly saying, listen, my day is, you know, I feel like fishing or the fruit of the poisonous tree, I'm going to catch something, and just pull individuals over just because, you know, because it's one of those days.
So, listen, there's a lot of ways that we do traffic enforcement, and we do a lot of work on Walnut Street, and especially recently because we've had a lot of issues on Walnut Street, and you know, we're trying to enhance the police presence there to bring some safety back to that community, because outside of the traffic violations, as I'm sure you well know, it sounds like you're from the neighborhood, there's been a significant amount of shootings and a couple of homicides that are very tragic, that really bother us to our core, and we want to make sure that we stop that and try to provide some safety and security for that neighborhood. And one of the mechanisms that we use is motor vehicle enforcement. Now, a lot of the stops that you may be talking about, and I don't know exactly, but I know the men and women are assigned to the traffic unit. The majority of those people make those 11,000 stops over the past 20 months. It's not the regular patrol officers in the marked cars that are going from call to call and answering calls for service. If you see somebody it's completely appears to you to be driving within all, you know, confines of the law and what they're supposed to be doing, it may very well be that the LPR, the license plate reader, has picked up some information about a bad registration, a warrant that may be out on that person, a tax issue that person may have, an insurance issue that person may have, an emissions violation that person may have, which would all be probable cause for the officer to stop that car. So in Waterbury, police officers don't stop cars without probable cause. So either a violation that they actually see of the law, motor vehicle law, city ordinance, or a criminal statute, or information that they obtain from the LPR, license plate reader, which is information that runs through the state of Connecticut motor vehicle database that tells officers whether the car is properly registered, insured, and the driver's licensed. So if there are issues where you think that you've been stopped for no reason whatsoever, you should certainly bring those to our attention, and there's a lot of different ways you can do that. You can do that through our website. You can come to the front desk. You're more than welcome to come to my office anytime you want. You can go to the Internal Affairs Division, but you certainly should report that type of activity.
No, I'm just saying because you said 11,000 cases, so all you saying 11,000 cases all had probable cause?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Any, yes?
My name is Malcolm. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. I've been living in Connecticut for 3 years now. And I pretty much see the same thing regarding police, black, Hispanic, whatever. I believe the initial statement was, how can we prevent racial profiling against blacks and police? I believe the answer to that is we have to understand where did the mindset of racial profiling came from. Everything has its origin. And racial profiling against blacks and Hispanics from the police is nothing new. It started in the 16th and 17th century with Johann Blumenbach. And some of us may know about scientific racism, where there was a science created behind to justify the fact that blacks and Hispanics, or the indigenous people who we call Native Americans today, can be treated a certain way. So during those times, we had something called slave patrol. And that is the forerunner of the American Police Department itself. Because slave patrol was created to keep minorities under control. This is where you get protect and serve from. It was never created to protect and serve us as minorities, but it was created to protect the properties and to serve those who have economic value at the time, which was not us. Eventually, as things progressed, civil law, you came with the militia, and the American Police Department started to enforce itself not only in the South, but also in the North of America. So the question to how do you stop racial profiling between police and blacks and Hispanics, you have to change the way you think. Because if you psychologically impart a mindset into people, it automatically trickles down from generation to generation to generation, whether you're intentionally doing it or whether you're unintentionally doing it, right? This is how we are with our children. I raise my son a certain way because my father raised me that way, right? So I treat you according to such because unintentionally or intentionally, psychologically, I've been taught that blacks and Hispanics are the lower classmen and we are the upperclassmen. So it's a mindset. We have to look at one another as people instead of race. Because before the word racism ever came about, America was never classified between black and white. We was classified by tribes. You know, the Anglo-Saxons and the Ethiopians and the Moors. Right? And the Native American, the indigenous people. But at the same time, during those times, scientific racism came up with the fact that whites were the most beautiful people in the world. Therefore, by that scientific justification, we can treat anyone any old kind of way. Right? Now, if you want to talk about racial profiling, you're profiling me according to my race, but you're also profiling me according to what's being taught to you about my race. And that has a lot to do with the media. That has a lot to do with the news. When you look on the TV, you don't see the good black man on TV. You see the savage on TV. You see the deadbeat father on TV. You see us breaking the law. You see us thinking that we are not accountable to the law. But we're all not like that. We are decent people. We have morals, we have respect, we have dignity. We love who we are, and we love you too. But if you was in our shoes, what would you do if you felt uncomfortable to the point where we can't even trust you enough to protect and serve us the same way you protect and serve each other? Right? So my answer, I may have the answer, I may not, but this is just how I think. In order to end racial profiling between Hispanics, black, and the police, you have to change the way you think about us.
we had something called ComStat, which gave rise, whether intended or not, I think, and not just me, my opinion's out with that, but a rise to a lot of abuses and a lot of racial profiling because ComStat targeted neighborhoods. Do you, the police chief, do you use that system here?
So we use statistics and look at statistics, but ComStat is the way it is in the fashion that the New York City Police Department does. We don't use that here. We look at violent crimes. We look at shots fired on a weekly basis, stolen vehicles, aggravated assaults, burglaries, and robberies. And what we try to do is determine patterns, try to see if we can deploy extra patrols to make sure that we can stop those issues from happening in certain parts of the city.
Yes, sir. Yours will be the last one.
Going for about an hour. No, I actually wanted to respond to that brother over there with respect to that the whole idea of racism being a mind, as far as changing it being a mindset. You're absolutely right. You're 100% right on that. The problem with that is, if you think getting folks to stop being racist is hard, try to get them to stop thinking that way. Now, there are a couple of things that certainly can be done, and it starts with education. I grant you that. But while that learning process is in place, and it's been in place, it's just that some of us aren't going to pick it up and run with it if we don't want to. Okay. But along with that, unless there's an accountability mechanism in place that speaks to racist actions by those in power, however you define them, you're not going to stop it. Because as a rule, folks aren't going to respond when you hit them in their pocketbook. Okay? And understanding that gives you, in my opinion at least, the motivation to go that route. And at the same time, we can certainly continue to teach people about racism, the institution itself, how it came about, and how you can address it. But until you get to that point where you get it, get this. You do a racist action, you're going to pay for it. That's what needs to happen.
It's been a pleasure having you here, and I just want to bring it to a close so you have an opportunity to talk. Thank you very much for being here.